I want to show you how you can check censorship on Google, for instance, on Google China. The first thing you do is you go to the country version of Google, the google.cn. But as you can see, you will be automatically forwarded to google.com. This happens if you're located outside of China. So now what you're going to do is you have to change your browser language to Chinese, your preferred browser language. In Firefox you go to Tools, Options, the Advanced tab, and then you hit Choose in the bottom right, which is the language list, and you pick Chinese from the list. I click Add, and then I move the Chinese up to my browser list, at the top of my browser list. So this means this is my preferred language. I hit OK. Now when I go to google.cn, Google will actually leave me on this page and not forward me to the international or US version of Google. So now I can enter something, let's say fun ringtones. Of course most people in China would enter something in Chinese, I guess, but for testing purposes or to explain this I can enter in any language, because mostly what Google China does is to censor domains and not to blacklist words, though they also have been caught doing that in the past, but mostly they will censor a domain and not let's say a word like strike or Mao or something. So what we do to check if it's censored, if it's a censored result page, we scroll down to the footnote to this place, and there's no message on this page disclosing that there's censorship happening. So we assume that actually this is true. We believe Google that they don't censor this page. Now we enter some more, let's say, politically sensitive term like torture, and I hit return, and there's some advertisement to the side. There's the Wikipedia page on top, and if I scroll down I can see that this page is self-censored, because this note in italics, if I translate it with Google Translator from Chinese to English, it will read, according to local laws, regulations and policies, some search results are not shown. So this is the default disclaimer, but it doesn't tell us which page is missing in the results. All we know is that Google defined, or Google ranked 10 pages, and then from those 10 pages they checked their domain blacklist, and if one of those top 10 pages was on the domain blacklist, then it was removed, and all the succeeding pages moved one place up, so you won't see the blacklisted page in question. So the best way to find the blacklisted page is to go to the more or less uncensored version of Google Chinese, which is on google.com. So we search for Google Chinese, and the top result is this URL. This is not google.cn, this is google.com/something else, and we hit it, and I enter the same search query, and I hit return. And though this may look like the same page, this is actually google.cn, the self-censored version of Google China, and this is sort of the uncensored version of Google China or Google Chinese. And now I can see the top result is the same, so the Wikipedia page remains uncensored. This doesn't mean that Chinese people can actually access this Wikipedia page. This depends on whatever the ISPs in China decide to censor from different regions, so you may or may not be able to actually see this page in China. Okay, but it's not censored on Google, so if we could scroll down we can see Turan.ish Lion, some French server. It exists on both Google China pages, so we scroll down and this URL is also the same. Channel 4 is also available on both pages, on both Google versions. torturegarden.com is also available on both. Okay, and we check and we compare. And we can actually see that the hrw.org domain is not available on the google.cn version, but Google determined it to be among the top 10 most important pages if no censorship is applied, but it doesn't show it on this version. But sometimes different data centers or different versions of Google show different results, in any case, censorship or not. So what we need to do to validate that this is actually censored, we copy the domain hrw.org and we paste it into the google.cn version, and then we proceed it with the site operator. The site operator makes Google check every page on the domain. So we hit return, and here you can see that site:/hrw.org returns not a single page on google.cn. What it does return is a self-censorship disclaimer again. It's always in italics, so even if you don't read Chinese characters, you can spot it. So Google will tell you, well, we didn't find anything for this site operator search. Make sure you didn't misspell it, and then they tell you, actually, this is censored. So all pages from this domain are missing in Google China. Now we take this query back to the uncensored version of Chinese Google. We hit return, and we can see there's about 45,300 result pages. So all those 45,000 pages are missing in Google China. There are actually millions and millions of pages missing in this version. And the torture keyword happened to be one of those pages where HRW, humanrightswatch.org, has something important to disclose. So what was the page in question? I click on the uncensored version, and this page talks about US torture and abuse of detainees. So it's well possible that the Chinese government doesn't actually have any problems with this page in specific, but what this does mean is that apparently the Chinese government has some problems with this domain and its disclosure of torture practices in certain countries. This is actually a very important page, a very important website on human rights issues. You can verify this by entering, for instance, human rights into Google, and you can see Google considers among like the 151 million pages on the topic of human rights, it considers humanrightswatch.org to be among the top 3 most important resources for researchers. And this top source is missing in Google China. So now something else we can do is we check Google Images, if it's censored in Google Images, and the same thing applies. You can actually see the footnote on the Google image results. You can check this in the news, in the maps results as well. Sometimes there's missing stuff in the maps results. So okay, but Google doesn't always make it easy for you to see what's missing, because they don't really disclose every search service they offer. For instance, the Google News service in China is actually self-censored, but because Google is omitting some sources, like maybe 8 sources, and they're not even crawling them in the first place, they will also not tell you if something is missing when you search in this service. So there's no self-censorship disclaimer in this service, but actually Google told us some years before that they're censoring in Google China. Let me find that post. Google never calls it censorship, so we need to find the post without this word. Okay, this is the sort of disclosure of Google that they censor news results in China. Let's check the blog post from 2004. And here Google will tell us, for users inside the People's Republic of China, we have chosen not to include sources that are inaccessible from within that country. So there's the disclosure, which is actually missing on google.cn at this time. And the same thing is actually true for the maps results. For instance, there's no satellite imagery for Google China. Actually, Google has satellite imagery for this location, but they will not offer you the satellite imagery. This is due to pressure from the Chinese government, actually. Let's compare the international maps. And we go to China. And you can see here we can switch to satellite view. This option is censored in Google China, even though Google doesn't sort of actively disclose this fact. They might have their own reasons. Or let's check the Google book search in China. Could be this one. No, that's the catalog. Let me search for Google book search China. Oh yeah, it's books.google.cn. Let's search for Mao. Okay, so we can see a lot of books here. There's no censorship disclaimer or disclosure by Google. But again, this doesn't mean it's not censored, because somewhere on this website Google tells us that they just include Chinese publishers or distributions from within China in this result list, but actually they scanned much more books containing the word Mao. We can compare this with the international version of Google Books. So we go to the international Google Books, we enter the same search query, Mao. Here you can see 26,000 books on the subject. Here you can see 281 books on the subject. So there's thousands of books missing on the international, on the Chinese version of Google Book Search. Again, they're not explicitly individually self-censored one by one. They're just sort of censored in general, because you don't accept, if you don't accept outside publishers, then you get rid of a lot of critical voices, because publishers in China, I suppose, have to restrict themselves to certain not so government critical subjects. So you get rid of a lot of critical works, and we can assume that Google actually wants to show the user as much as possible. So this must be a result of pressure by the Chinese government. So now I want to check some censorship word, but censorship word, but I want to check the Chinese word. So what I can do is I first translate something that I'm interested in. Of course, if you speak Chinese, you just enter the Chinese characters here, but if you don't speak Chinese and you're interested in the Chinese censorship, then you start with the word in the translator of Google. Let's say I enter the word strike, and I want to see if the Chinese word is censored. So I pick the simplified translator, and I translate the word strike into Chinese. Now I copy the word back to image search, just to check if it may be the right word. So if I see striking people on this image result, then maybe it's the correct translation. I can still not be too sure, but it may be related. Now that I see some people here who may be on a strike, I can enter this in the Chinese Google. And on this page I scroll down to the bottom again, and I can find the self-censorship disclaimer. Now if I want to, let's say I want to write a blog post on this, then of course I have to verify that this means indeed that it's the word strike, so I have to consult a Chinese person or a Chinese speaking person. Click on images, and again the word is censored, or some domain that that is triggered for this word is censored, to be more precise. Actually, Google Images is censored in a different way, in a different additional way. It's because always safe search is enabled in Google China, and you can't disable it even if you are grown up. So what this means is that even if the domain in the results is not on the blacklist of the not on the government blacklist, it may be on the adult content blacklist, or on the adult content filter. So why is Google doing all this? According to their own disclosure of the self-censorship, let's check the disclosure. According to their own disclosure, the problem was that they want to work hard to create a great experience for their users, and the former level of service they've been offering in China was like suboptimal, because 10% of the time, according to their statistics, the Google.com version accessed from within China was causing some connection troubles. So they decided to go ahead and censor millions and millions of pages to be able to provide a official sort of government sanctioned version of Google, which is google.cn, and then it should work more smooth from within China. That's what Google tells us they hope to achieve. Here you can see the official government sort of censorship disclaimer. If we click here, we refer to a government page, so you can see that Google is working closely with the Chinese government to provide google.cn. Now when you ask Google how many pages they censor, or which domains they censor, or if there's any words that are blacklisted, then Google will at least not tell me or other members of the blogging community or the press what exactly they're doing or what they're not doing in China. They keep this secret, so that's why you need to reverse engineer the censorship like I've shown you.